being of African descent. I did get bullied quite a lot at primary school. That is inextricably a part of who I am. It's my DNA. Having that feeling of being ostracized as a kid when you don't really understand the world can be very debilitating. So it definitely creates this friction in terms of identity.
There's this sense often feeling like we don't belong. How have you reconciled that for yourself?
Who I am and what I'm doing in this world is a constant evolution. Who you are kind of unravels to you as your life develops and grows and evolves. With that understanding now, I definitely feel more at peace with that question. This is for anybody who does have these identity struggles. You have every right to reconnect with an identity that you feel aligns more with yourself. The door is there for you to open.
Before we jump into the episode, I want to let you know about my groundbreaking program, Breaking the Chains of Avoidance, a program designed just for avoidant men to help them from going from avoidance of relationships and love into deep connection and the abilities to create deep connection and lasting relationships, right? So if you're interested in this, if avoidance is ruining your dating life and your relationships, just go down to the description below and you can put yourself onto the wait list so that you can get a huge discount off when I launch the program in a few weeks. The program will be starting on the 22nd of April, so don't delay. Welcome back, people. Welcome back to another episode of Authentic Man Podcast. And today I have with me a man who I've known a long time. He's known from the days when the podcast went by a different name. Many of you probably have not stumbled across the podcast. If you go back to episodes, 1 to 27, it was under a different name and it was about different topics, mainly about dating. But it's a man I've known for a long time. We've met in person. We've spent time together. We've laughed. We've joked. I've been a guest on his podcast. He's a real multi-talented artist. And that's something we'll probably dive into today. He doesn't just, as today he's talking about his book and being an author, but he's also a man who spits bars. He's a man who is in the world of corporate work and so forth. Today we have with us Dami. How are you doing?
Thank you for the intro, David. I appreciate it. And it's funny. It's been, I think we met maybe like 6-7 years ago. Isn't it mad how the time just...
Time flies,
and
time flies.
It's crazy. And both our lives, I think, have changed quite significantly from that moment to now. And I guess I'm happy to be on the podcast and share some insights with your audience and also catch up somewhat with yourself as well, and kind of pay you back for coming onto my podcast and giving you some content now. So I'm excited for our conversation today.
Yeah, I'm gonna dive in, and this is a question that kind of come to you today. I quite like this. Is when you kind of reflect on your life, what was the significant challenge that you faced, and how did that shape who you've become today?
Ooh. Damn, that is a deep question to start off with. Damn.
Yeah, man. Diving straight in.
Okay, how vulnerable do I want to be? Okay, so I guess problem that I had growing up was I think I didn't have the right tools to understand who I was. So I had a lot of struggles with identity growing up, and even into my 20s, just I guess morphing in different ways. So I guess as a kid, understanding my place in the world was always something that I had struggled with. I did get bullied quite a lot at primary school. So I think that was the inception of me even thinking about my place within society, because having that feeling of being ostracized as a kid when you don't really understand the world can be very debilitating. And then trying to build yourself back up from that point can be quite a challenge. Obviously, I know a lot of people have been bullied in their childhood, but I would say that it had a significant impact on just my thought process on myself. And as I got older, and as we move through different stages of life, you know, when I was a kid up until let's say 18 or early 20s, the system is set up for the path that you're going to follow. So, you know, you're going to go to primary school and then you're going to do your SATs and then go to, you know, secondary school, GCSEs, A levels, uni, do your degree. So whilst there was that struggle with identity in terms of my place, my rank, let's say socially, and how cool you are, and all these kind of things that you know, teenagers and young people do experience, having that structure there to kind of push you to where you're going to go helps kind of keep everything somewhat in place. And then it was when I was 23, just after graduating and starting work in finance, which I hated, that I really had to confront who I am and what I'm doing in this world, which prompted a very severe existential crisis when I was 23. You know, thinking about my life, who I am, what happens when I die, what do I want to do in this life, what does it all mean? So that was when I really had to, I guess, confront that idea of who am I. And I guess after that, I started working on those aspects of myself, whether it was through, you know, getting mentors or coaching. I mean, I would definitely look at you as one of my early mentors in that journey, especially through how we met and the conversations that we had, you know, about ayahuasca and other things that we experience as men in the world. Um, I guess through through trying to answer that question intentionally and trying different things, traveling to different countries, again, mentorship, as I said, writing journals, which I'm sure we'll get into, and those kind of activities. I started to, and I may not have known it at the time, but as I'm older, I'm understanding that I was starting to build that relationship with self by practicing all these things. And I think at the point that I'm at now, I would say that the way I look at that question, who am I? What am I? Who is my identity? I've come to understand now at 32 years old that it's a constant evolution who we are, and it changes. And I'm sure you as well have seen how who you are kind of unravels to you as your life develops and grows and evolves. And so with that understanding now, um, and also a bit more understanding of self, having done those practices, I definitely feel more at peace with that question. Not completely solved, but just a much bigger level of peace with who am I, what is my purpose in this world, and you know, what is my identity. And yeah, I guess at this point, that's where I'm at.
Thank you. Yeah, man. As you said, the bullying piece is something I speak to a lot of guys about, and how it impacts how they view themselves and how they view particularly other people's opinions and the importance of other people's opinions. We place a lot of attention on like, what do people think of me and so forth. And I know that bullying is a topic that you brought into the book as well, something that found its way in there. How did your experience mirror that of the character in the book? And often, you know, talk a little bit about the story as well of within it.
Yeah, so David is referencing my novel Ogaman, The Birth of a New King, which is a story that follows a British-Nigerian teenager who acquires superpowers, uses them for his own good, his own selfish desires until tragedy strikes and it unravels that there's a dark force threatening the inhabitants of London, and either he stops them or everybody perishes. So the teenager in the story is Tunde Adeyemi, and that scene at the beginning, which I think you're referencing, which shows the bullying that Tunde faces, is funny because that incident kind of loosely happened to me.
Mm.
Um, and I thought it would be good to capture because from my conversations with other, um, let's say, teenagers or people who've lived in London or other like urban cities within the UK, have either experienced themselves or witnessed. I'm not sure, David, if that's something you've kind of loosely seen, that scene at the beginning where Tunde is confronting his bullies after a lesson in school. And yeah, that was something that came from an experience of mine where somebody who, let's say, had more rep in school than myself um had an altercation with me in a similar way, which was built on the foundation of some jives and other kind of jabs within the classroom. It's funny because me and that guy are very, very good friends. He's one of my closest friends right now. So we kind of patched up at the time. Um, that was something that I faced, and I think the reason that I brought that into the story is because, well, one, a lot of us do have those kind of low points that we face. Whoever we are, right? Whoever we are in the world, we've had moments where we felt ostracized or we felt shunned. And so, because a lot of the story follows Tunde's journey of going from from adolescence to adulthood, and his reclamation of his heritage as well, which is another piece, while also obviously acquiring superpowers in the context of the story. I think it was important to show that even with that great elevation that he's had, that initial starting point in his life prior to what people would see as his glamorous moments, um, he still had, I guess, the humble um, beginnings in the sense of how he was treated, and he still has to navigate that self-perception,
Mm.
even though he has, to the eyes of everyone else, elevated. Um, so I think that was an important piece to include in the story, because that is the hero's journey, in essence. Um, yeah.
Yeah. And it's an important piece you say there about self-perception, because, the outside, like you said, to the outside world, he's become this powerful person, this powerful entity. And it's the same in our very real world that we live in now, where people become really powerful. But those moments of childhood or adolescence, which were wounding or painful and difficult, and you kind of alluded it to yourself with your own experience, they remain in the psyche. They remain in the psyche and in the mind, and we still perceive ourselves often, to some conscious or unconscious degree as that little boy, like yourself. Like I experienced bullying, and a lot of my bullying was around being stupid and being called stupid and not being able to read very well, not being able to spell very well. My handwriting was bad and maths was terrible. So I was like kind of bullied in class. And that, for me, I can really see how that impacts. Actually, if I'm really honest, it was something I had to really reckon with, putting my content into the world, speaking into the world, writing Instagram posts and people reading my stuff and telling me, you spelt this wrong, there's a typo there. Like, there was a real part of me that every time I heard that, is I'm whisked back to that little boy who's like 9 years old, who would be bullied and be ridiculed. And, at that time, I didn't really have the capacity for defensiveness or anything like that. But when it comes up now, I see there's a part of me that wants to defend, that wants to be like, wants to basically tell people to just fuck off and get over themselves. And I, in my head, I still kind of do that. But there's also, for me, people don't imagine that them telling me that has any impact, because they see me as the perception they have of me today, this man who's doing podcasts and, you know, and all these sorts of things. And I guess I'm just wondering if there's a question here. There's not quite a question here. There's this piece where the self-perception that we have of ourselves isn't up to date with the person we are actually now, you know, and now is whenever now is. But actually, we're still part of our psyche is stuck in the past, still holding on to some beliefs and ideas about ourselves that, you know, have their roots in our childhood, our lack, our fears, our worries, the things that hurt us.
Yeah, it's so true what you're saying, because about the fact that somebody could make a comment about you, about a post that you wrote, and to them they're just saying it's just a throwaway comment, but for you, because you understand the context of yourself and what you've been through, you perceive that comment so differently, and it unearths all the stuff that you know, happened as a child. And I guess to go into more detail of the things that I was bullied about, one was my ability to get girls. That was a common one. I think a lot of us face that, because truth be told, not a lot of us weren't getting girls when we were kids. Like, let's just keep it real. Let's just keep it so real. So many liars out here talking about girls that went to school down the road, and then you find out that that school it's a flipping boys' school or something. I remember there was one guy in my playground at school who used to say he's got a girl that goes to Ilford County, and then everyone's like, bruh, that's a boys' school, you know? So plenty of people were like, but anyway, I digress. So that was something that I was bullied about a lot growing up. And obviously now, you know, things are different. I've had girlfriends, I've dated women, you know, and I know that that kid who, I guess, got bullied for those things doesn't exist anymore, but to a degree. But if someone were to make a comment in the in that aspect about, I don't know, my ability to attract women, or my ability to romance or feel love, or those kind of things, and really honed in on that, it's definitely still gonna make me look back to the 7, 8, 9, 10, 14-year-old version of me, and he is gonna respond or feel some kind of way about that, even though I consciously know it's that the reality is different. So it's funny how it's funny how that works out. What would you say from your perspective is a way to like put that little person inside at peace from your perspective?
Yeah. I think there's a key is to, you know, inner child work. You know, it's so not classic, but it's like the classic answer of these, you know, tending to those parts of ourselves. You know, there's in part of inner child work is like inner parenting and so forth. And a lot of it is can be done in meditation or writing practices. It's like meeting that part of us, that younger part of ourselves, right? And speaking to, listening to, offering what we can now that we didn't get then, you know? And for a lot of us, really, a lot of people, and I've speak for myself, it's like just someone to listen, or someone to say, it's going to be okay. Like, this won't be forever, because at the time when it's happening, it feels like it's the end of the world, and it feels like it's going to be like this forever, you know, or someone who would just listen. And, you know, for many of us, you know, we would have had busy parents. You know, my mum was working 40, 50 hours a week. My dad was doing the same. You know, we didn't really have anyone to kind of speak to and express that to, and who would listen and could give us wisdom. So sometimes, like, noticing in the moments when it does come up, like, oh, look, I'm really feeling, you know, I'm feeling like, oh, it's that same feeling I get when I was a young boy. It's like meeting that part of us. You know, it could be a practice to do weekly. I do some of my clients to do this. It's like, go and meet that part of us weekly and give it a voice. You know, maybe, and this is where things like embodiment practices come in. There might be that part of you that just wants to like scream and smash a pillow and be angry, because maybe you couldn't be angry because you couldn't show that at home or at school, or there were things you might have wanted to say to that bully, right? And maybe you stand at home and you imagine you're standing in front of them, you know, as a young child, and you say those things out loud, because there's a like a liberation of allowing those words to come through that didn't come through before. But it's also like a process, you know, things will come up. And there comes a time, you know, and I feel like definitely myself with this kind of piece around like the spelling and being corrected, where you can kind of smile because there's also a second part that I really see. That's the person who's saying this thing to you, you know, because sometimes we have to see ourselves and go, am I overreacting to this moment? And I have the thing with people who love to correct people on Instagram in public places. And I think there's a big power trip for people. And I'm not saying this is because it's been happened to me, but it's a very interesting that you could read someone does, you know, a carousel of 10 pictures with writing on them. And then there's a whole caption. And the one thing that you focus on is the typo on page 2, right? Or something like that. Like the one thing in there is like, I find it really interesting when I see people that do that. It's like, you want to feel really, it's a bit like the bully that I experienced. He wants to feel important. He wants to feel bigger than other people. And I observed that and I'm like, okay, you're doing that thing. Okay, cool. Well, you know, it's okay. You're important too. You know, sometimes I think I've replied like that to people. Thank you. Yeah. You're important. You know, I see you. You know, like, and it's not from a place of, and you must not feel sorry for people, but you see that they're also this wounded little child that's trying to be seen or trying to, you know, do certain things and get attention or be smart or feel clever. So it's a kind of multiple stage. It's like having compassion for other people as well, because, you know, sometimes our own reactions happen internally. You observe them, you notice them, but it's a process of ultimately acceptance, you know, accepting that kind of inner piece of you. And I guess that's a question for you, actually. In your book, how does the main character come to acceptance around what he's experienced?
Oh, that's a great question. Wow. Well, as I mentioned in the synopsis of the book, there's a moment where tragedy strikes Tunde. So without revealing too much information, because I don't want to read the story, ruin the story for anybody who is planning to read it and is going to be pissed if I mention the details. But one of the aspects of Tunde's journey with regards to the tragedy is that he is on a journey of grappling with accepting the circumstances that he faces. And I guess the way that I've written his character is him going through that journey of grappling with acceptance actually impacts his actions and his behaviors and shapes the character that he becomes, especially him going from his adolescence and moving into adulthood, not just because of his biological, you know, the biology of him being a teenager and going through puberty, but also through the experiences that he's having within the story, whether it's with the let's say darker forces that are at play and him fighting against those, or accepting responsibility, or accepting the existence or the experiences that he's had. And in his internal grapple with those experiences, it shapes the character that he's becoming as he goes into adulthood. And I would even say that grappling is actually what's pushing him into adulthood, because now he has to act while also dealing with all the internal things, which I think becomes much more prominent as we get older, because we start to have more responsibilities, or we start to feel more pressure from society, things which the character Tunde is experiencing. And through that, he's because he still has to act and still has to maintain, I guess, a degree of sanity while dealing with these things. He has now been pushed into essentially adulthood
Mm.
through those experiences, which I hope makes sense.
Yeah, yeah. And as you're describing it, it kind of sounds like a form of rites of passage. You know, in many cultures, we talk about rites of passage, and, you know, there's something they often say is lost in the West, which, you know, is actually true, largely true. This part
Hmm.
where we have to kind of deal with things and we move from being a child, being a child really, into kind of adulthood. I never forget being in, I think it's Brazil. I was in Brazil, yeah. I spent some time in the Amazon in Brazil many, many years ago, probably about 14, 15 years ago. And we had a guide who was taking us through the Amazon, showing us different trees. And I remember he showed us these ants called bullet ants. And he was like, you know, they get the name because the pain is akin to being shot by a bullet. Then he goes on to express that there's a tribe that the young boys have to put both their hands into a basket full of bullet ants, right? And at which
Hmm.
point, if they can stay there, stay conscious and you know, be not completely unperturbed, but stay conscious and aware, if they're able to leave their hands in there for a certain amount of time, they're able, then they become men. They'd be able to take wives. I think that's what I remember him saying. I might have got that slightly wrong. Any kind of anthropologists or people who are well versed in this, but there's this importance of experiencing something difficult and painful. You know, often the rites of passage of that. You know, there's a book I read by one of my old coaches, William Whitecloud, and I know he comes from Swaziland. And he says that there, the kids have to go off into the bush for a certain number of days and find their own food and look after themselves and so forth. And I wonder, is this was for you as writing the book, there was a conscious idea around inserting this kind of rites of passage with inner turmoil and needing to kind of move out of this kind of childlike way of being into adulthood?
Yeah, wow, that's it's not something I've like reflected on directly. Um, I would actually say that because I started writing the book when I was 25. So I think at 25 was when I felt there was a gear shift in life, one of the gear shifts, because I'm sure there's many more to come, and people have many within their lives depending on the pathways that they choose. But for myself, particularly at 25, I felt there was a gear shift in my way of thinking, in terms of, um, I guess, things like delayed gratification,
Mm.
the fact that good things, can if you want to build something that's great, it takes time. Like this took me 6.5 years to finish.
Wow.
So to do that, that I'm glad that I was starting to get that understanding at 25. I didn't have it completely, but I was aware this is gonna take time. This is gonna take me a while to do, and those kind of that gear shift, I guess started me, introduced me more intentionally to the journey of, I guess, masculinity, um, you know, rites of passage, as you said. Wouldn't necessarily say I thought of it that way, but just you need to experience certain things to then say, I am a man, or I am this insert title here person, right? Or I am an Oga, um, for example, which means boss or leader in Yorùbá and Nigerian slang. So to acquire those titles, they're things that you need to have done or gone through. And so as I was getting older and building my understanding of those things, I guess I wove them into the story. For Tunde, I guess, even though he is a teenager, I think the experience of getting superpowers is kind of that experience of being given, I don't know, a lot of money or a certain inheritance, or knowing that you're, because you're in a certain family, there's something that's coming to you, as a consequence of that, which is going to change the that I guess the internal story that you have about yourself and also your external reality leading to you being pushed along the line from your child adolescent stage into adulthood. So I thought, even though he's a 15-year-old kid, those experiences now mean he's not just a boy anymore. Um, and so I think then reflecting on my own experience, I guess, in terms of rites of passage, if I think of example, like, at uni, we had if you wanted to be in a football team, you had to go through the formal social where you had to do these challenges, to be part of the team. Um, I think, as you get older as a man, taking responsibility for your well-being, where you live, pathway forwards that you're choosing. What am I choosing to invest my time in, knowing that it takes time to build something good? If I'm not consciously making those choices now, then nobody in the world is coming to do that for me like I had for 20 odd years throughout the school system, right? Those kind of things, experiences allow me to weave those kind of um, uh, plot lines into the journey that Tunde goes on. Um, so yeah, uh, I don't know if you want any more details of what's in the book to relate it to. I can
No,
try,
no,
but
I really want to. You mentioned something, I talk a lot about masculinity. And I think often, the experience we have a lot, I speak to a lot of men, is that like masculinity is just vilified, right? There's a vilification of masculinity across the board. And I find often in movies and books, there's a kind of a polar, it's either like there's a glorification of masculinity or there's a villainization. How does your kind of experience of developing your own masculinity mirror that of your character Tunde in the book?
mm, wow, that's a really good question. So starting off with, I guess, my own experience of masculinity. Um, I guess for me, my I guess I grew up with a maybe slightly negative view of masculinity, based on, I guess, the relationships that I've had with older male figures in my family, and just in general. There was I guess it was kind of like uh I was more in the vilification lane, just slightly veered off that way. But I think it's because I didn't have an understanding of what it was. I was only looking at it from the, you know, um, iron fist, um, violent, overbearing, and these kind of these kind of oppressive qualities that masculinity can embody. Um, I think as I got older, though, I started to see that there was, and started to understand that, one, as a man, it was important for me to really understand what masculinity is, because that is, who I am. And then understanding that there's other aspects to it. There's the building aspect to it. There's the defining boundaries aspect to masculinity. There's creating a container for yourself and others to live in. There's the knowing of bearing the weight of responsibility. There's a reason why with great power comes great responsibility. Is a cliche phrase, but it really is, it's so real. Like, and that is actually, I probably say, one of the biggest quotes that speaks to what masculinity in its rounded healthiness is with great power comes responsibility, because you're building the container for everybody else to live within, or for your community to live within, or your family, or the people you care about, or whoever. And so it's important to understand that the things that you do with that power have such an impact on those people. And the difficulties that come with that, you have to, it's something that you're going to battle with and process. And so with, I guess with Tunde in his particular journey, one of the things that he does grapple with is the fact that, once he gets his powers, he uses them for his own desires selfishly. And I think that speaks to the fact that he's still a child. He's still in that adolescent child phase where he doesn't understand what responsibility is. And it's through the experience, the I guess negative experiences that he has, that he realizes that what he holds, or the power that he has to be used intentionally, because it can have negative consequences if unchecked. If he's not intentionally using them, the knock-on effects can be quite devastating for the people around him and himself. And so I think that was important to weave into the story. And then also, as he reconciles with that, understanding which actions contribute to which negative outcomes, or which actions are necessary, even if they do negatively affect him, because it is important for the container that he's building, or for the community that he's serving. How do his actions affect that? And is he and even grappling with having to make decisions that he knows are going to be negative for some, or are going to have some knock-on effects, but having to take those and make those decisions anyway, and deal with the consequences of those. So I think it was important to show that, because I'm sure I haven't achieved it myself, but getting a huge dose of power, I can only imagine, while bringing obviously the obvious benefits, has its drawbacks as well. And so I thought it was important to show both the excitement and um, the I don't know, just feeling gassed that you've got such powers, and also showing that you need to be intentional, because with those things comes a level of responsibility, and consequence for using those things. So it's not a free for all. And I think that speaks to at least my own experience of masculinity, and understanding that having power isn't inherently a bad thing. It's how it's used, and understanding that for using it, there is a price or consequence that will arise from it. And either you understand and are ready to pay that, or you are ready to at least bear the weight of that, despite the decisions and actions that you make.
Yeah, it's a really powerful explanation there of kind of, the intentional use of power and discernment as well. Like I hearing there's like looking at the decision in front of oneself and being like, oh, this is the impact. It's like seeing the like really looking at choices and decisions and seeing the fallout of them, instead of just acting impulsively and selfishly, starting to see this really important thing I think we learn as we grow up, we mature, not just get older, mature, is this power of discernment. This power of discernment of like, oh, when I do this thing, this is how, it's something as simple as when I go out and I drink a lot, I wake up in the morning and I feel hungover and I don't want to do any work. I don't want to do anything. I just want to lie in bed. Like, what's the impact on the people I live with, or my friends and family, or the plans that I make? And then we'll stop. And I think part of maturity is the kind of stopping and being like, is this something I really want to do? Is this really furthering what I'm about today? And it might be, you might be on holiday with some friends, and being hungover is no problem because you're not on the beach. But there's also the thinking of, oh, I've got to go to work tomorrow and I've got a big presentation or whatever it may be. And there's a maturity in going, okay, like what's the knock-on effects? And also seeing where we may choose to do something that has some negative impacts on us, but for the wider community and people, there's a positive there's a positive knock-on effect for them. And I do see this as like an kind of intrinsic part of kind of masculinity, and especially when we get into mature masculinity, is this discernment around choices and decisions. And, you know, I think we live in a society now that can be somewhat selfish. We are, you know, we're indoctrinated into the individual worlds, you know, and I see this happen particularly in relationship as well. But, you know, what I'm hearing you say there is like seeing this community, like, I am part of a community. I'm a leader of the community. How do I service? Like, how can I serve the community in the best way where it's not just about me, you know? And also I hear leadership, you know, another important part around masculinity that I often talk about is this leadership of like, oh, how can I serve others, and what serves the most people, what serves the people in the community. And I can even put myself to one side, and I think of myself as part of the community. And I think it's really, really powerful lessons contained.
Yeah, I definitely. I think the leadership angle of masculinity is one that I think, because of the selfishness that has pervaded, I think, especially within the Western world, we don't act, or generally speaking, let's say, we live very siloed lives right now in the West. I would say, especially men. I don't feel like there's a lot of I don't feel like we talk, generally speaking, about the responsibility aspect of being a man, and even making decisions that will negatively affect us. You know, realizing that we'll have to make those decisions that negatively affect us for the betterment of everybody, I think is something that we've lost, which is why I think the world is looking the way it is, in terms of all these, you know, companies just 10xing their prices, squeezing every little bit of juice out of everyone else. And because those are the people that are leading the community, it's filtered down through everything. At least this is my opinion on it. And I think it comes from not having strong leaders, or leaders who care about the betterment of the community or the society. Some may call that tyrannical, or you know, power hungry, or extremely selfish. And I think whatever you call those things, those actions that the people leading our communities take filter down through to the members of that community. And I think it's definitely had an impact on men and how we view and navigate the world now. I think that's why we see a lot of, or from my perspective, why we see a lot of these wars, gender wars online. I think I see them pretty much every day, and it's wild because, David, I'm sure you remember. Do you not remember a time where it was just like, where it didn't exist? And when we were talking about dating, or women, let's say in particular, the onus was on us to just be better. There was the narrative wasn't, oh, you know, women are XYZ, and that's why men should be ABC. The onus was just on, as a man, how can you improve? As a man, how can you improve? How can you get better? What can you do to level up? This is the situation. What can you do? Whereas now I feel like the discourse is in a different place, where men are trying to kind of palm off responsibility onto, or accountability onto, women. And I don't know, I feel like an important lesson for us to learn is that we have to take a lot of accountability, because obviously we have more of the masculine within us. Um, yeah, so I guess as it relates to the book, in terms of leadership, um, there are some I guess aspects in there which I hope kind of subtly reinforce at least my belief, my perspective, and I'm sure other people share it, which is that, you know, we've got to take accountability for the things we're doing, even if it is a gradual process. Like, we got to take it on board, you know? We got to take it on board, especially if we've been given gifts or power or these kind of things. I think especially in that situation, especially you should be able to take responsibility if you've been given a lot, you know, to whom much is given, much is expected. That I fully believe in that in that philosophy.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think it's interesting you say about power, and as you were speaking, the gender wars and so forth. And I think one of the things that's percolating in my mind at the moment is this kind of idea that, if you have power and you've always had power, you don't see that you have power because that's just your norm. It's just your normal state. So say, for instance, and some people struggle with this, by being a man, there's certain privilege that we have, right? And by privilege, I don't mean life is easy. I just mean there's certain things you don't worry about in the same way. Men aren't just generally wandering around worrying about being raped, and sexually assaulted at any given moment, right? So that's a kind of privilege. It's a privilege, right? In the same way that white people don't really concern themselves with being racially abused, for instance, right? But if you've always if you've always been a man, this was normal for you not to really worry about being sexually assaulted. Like, yeah, maybe you might worry about being attacked by other men, for instance, or you might mildly worry about it. Like, for instance, I don't, when I, sometimes I walk home from the station late at night, and am I a bit more vigilant? There's like a bit of an alleyway that I walk through. I hold my keys, I turn my headphones off. I'm aware if there's anyone behind me, anyone in front of me, looking to the alleyway quite clearly. But I'm not overtly worried about taking that route so much that I'll take a different route or I will get a taxi, right? And I think that's a kind of privilege and also a power that we have. But because it's a power I've always had, I don't realize I have that power because it's just normal for me, right? And I think this is the thing with power and the thing with, say, for instance, men versus women, which I think is a really unnecessary kind of war that we see, but also understandable. Because then you can flip the side and, be a woman. And, the walk I do sometimes late at night, there's times where I've seen women in front of me walking up that road, and there's like a road that leads into an alleyway. And it's like, to get to this side of where I live. And if a woman's there, sometimes I place myself in their experience. I'm like, what could it be like to be you? Because right now, maybe you're walking down this dark road and you're thinking, oh God, someone could attack me. And it's one thing to say to someone to get beaten up. Like us men, we might concern ourselves being beaten up in a certain way. But to have to think about sexual assault and rape is a very different thing that us men never really, it's a certain level of violation that we never really, and the traumatic nature of it and so forth. And I guess when we think of this kind of men versus women and men being angry at women for, say, what, often is called misandry, what is called misandry, is a lack of understanding of the privilege and power. And again, when I say privilege and power, I don't necessarily mean that every single man is more privileged than every woman or that every single man has power over women. It's not necessarily that. It's just as a generalized topic, there's a kind of power and privilege that we wield that we don't realize we have because we've never really looked at it. We never really experienced it. I guess it's only when you speak to women, you really understand their experience and the fears that they have and what they go through. Or, if you're white and you listen to some people of colors and black people and hear their experience, you start to realize the privilege you have. And I guess when I see this gender war between men and women and men kind of blaming women for the way they're being and so forth, in a kind of dating relationship sense, I do understand it. Don't mistake understanding for agreement. I just understand. But I'm with you. I think responsibility is a really powerful tool for us to be empowered in our lives. and when it comes to, men being angry at women, again, I understand why they're angry. They spent their lives growing up being rejected, being ignored, feeling like they're not the guy that women want. Women's, on one hand, they might feel, quote unquote, women want a nice guy. And then, quote unquote, women then choose the bad boy that's not like them. And then the women get annoyed at the bad boys, but they pass up all the nice guys. And obviously it's much more nuanced than that. But that's the kind of general thing that we hear men complaining about. And I get it, man. I get it, guys. I get it. But the nuance of the kind of good guy, nice guy versus the bad boy is a very interesting and nuanced conversation. But I don't see much use in blame. And there's both sides, like I speak to a lot of women about dating and relationship stuff. It's like blame doesn't help us move forward. Blame kind of keeps us stuck in the emotions of it. And then, maybe there's a place for blame to start with, but then one must take responsibility and look at oneself. And it sounds like, there's a really healthy dose of that in your writing about responsibility and the power that responsibility how responsibility can empower us.
Yeah, it's I guess if you look at it from even just a very simple logical level, taking out all the nuance, if you're in charge of, if you're responsible for what happens to you on a simple level, then it means you're in control of the outcome, because you can change how you act if you take responsibility to change your situation. But if you blame others and that's where the buck stops, then you remove all the power from yourself, because then you're at the mercy completely of things that are outside of you, right? So even on that logical level, I think there's power in taking responsibility. And I think as it relates to men, from my opinion as well, I think this is something I've been doing salsa for about a year and a half. Have you done any?
I haven't done much, but it's a beautiful dance to watch. I haven't done a salsa class for maybe 10, 15 years.
Oh, wow, long time. Do you reckon you still got the basic step in you?
No, not
at all. Maybe you and also can start when your child gets a bit older, and you can find some time to get into it. But I think one of the things that I've been learning from it, not just obviously, the dances and the moves and all these things, which are obviously cool, they're nice to do, nice to have in a party for sure. If you're listening, maybe you want to pick it up for your to add it to your arsenal. But one of the big things that I've been learning from it is philosophy, particularly as it relates to the leader and the follower in the dance, or as it to what that infers. Leader and follower is man and woman, generally speaking. Man being the leader, woman being the follower in the dance setting. And one of the first things that they teach everyone is that as the leader, you need to take responsibility, because you're the person directing the ship. Obviously, the follower has some aspects of them which is about support, which is about cooperation, which is about maybe giving some guidance in instances where the dance or the movement of the ship, let's say, isn't quite going right, and that needs to be said. However, so that the ship or the dance can move accordingly and move smoothly, there needs to be an understanding that somebody, the leader, has responsibility, and if things are to go wrong, that they take accountability for that, because they're the ones who are making the decisions on how the whole structure, the whole container, the whole dance moves. And I think that's really highlighted the importance of us taking control, because essentially we're kind of directing the ship in the relationship. Generally speaking, it's not always that way. However, it made me realize that it's going to be harder to control the movement and the progress of, or the success of that ship or container or the dance, if you have two people trying to lead and two people um, taking responsibility, or if you have two people that are followers essentially, then neither knows which way is going to move and they're putting the blame on the other person. And then it's very difficult for there to be any cooperation in that. So, with the roles set as they are leader, follower, and with a lot of men to women relationships mirroring that in the sense of the man taking a lot of responsibility, I don't think it's wrong for that to be the case. I think that's the how masculinity and femininity do interact with each other. I think it's just important for us to understand that that is the role that we have, and we can't, have that power to steer the ship without taking the responsibility that then comes with it. So yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I wanted to ask about, your stories about British-born Nigerian. And it's a kind of, you talked earlier about identity, and I guess I can have some resonance with this as being a British-born Jamaican. There's this sense often, I'll talk about myself, the sense often of feeling like we don't belong. You don't really belong. I'm not really British. I'm not really Jamaican. I go home to Jamaica, they tell me I'm English. I'm in England. People are asking me where I'm from. How?
Oh, I know it. I know that life.
How have you kind of personally, and I imagine that reflects in your character Tunde, how have you reconciled that for yourself?
Oh, wow. This is the $1 million question, David. Yeah, it's wow. Where do I start with this? Well, actually, going back to the bullying aspect we talked about earlier, one of the other things I used to get bullied about a lot was my Africanness, being of an African, being of African descent. It may be a surprise for maybe some of the younger listeners, because I realize there's things have changed since we were kids. But at least in my generation, there was a lot of anti-Africanness, I guess, generally in society, and then also with people in schools and bullying and those things. So for me, that was something that I think I buried quite a lot until I got older, into my teenage years and went to university. And it's something identity wise that I've been grappling with quite a lot, because obviously I am Nigerian. I've grown up in a Nigerian household. My full name is Yorùbá. So and I've been around the culture, so that is inextricably a part of who I am. It's who it's my DNA. So it's the foundations of who I am. Yet I've been socialized in the UK, in London specifically, but let's say UK generally. And through that has definitely created some kind of friction between, whether you're British or Nigerian, especially given how I felt that the general mainstream British society has treated myself or people who look like me or from the same background as myself. So it definitely creates this friction in terms of identity, right? Especially if maybe your country of heritage when you do visit. So when you've been to Jamaica or when I've been to Nigeria, and they'll call me Oyibo, they'll call me white person because of how I sound, and I find it funny because it's like, whoa. It's not that simple, mate. It's not that simple. But I think I think what's actually interesting helped me is two things. Um, One has actually been writing the book. Through the process of writing the book, so to I guess to go into a bit more detail, there's the world that Tunde is in a dystopian London, which is infused with aspects of Yoruba mythology. So in the process of writing the book, um, one of the things that I wanted to capture for Tunde is his reclamation of his um, Yoruba Nigerian heritage through the journey that he goes on in the story, and because I had some idea of aspects of Yoruba culture, obviously, and Nigerian culture more widely, but the book made me, or the book required me to do more research and to actually learn more about my Yoruba culture. So learning more about the deities. So the Yorubas have their own. We have our own religious system called Ifa. I don't practice Ifa yet because I'm not. Haven't gone through the rites of passage which are included within the spiritual system. However, I've done a lot of research on it. So we have orishas. So these are different deities within the system. So you have Olodumare, which is like the all supreme consciousness of reality, and then you have orishas that are below him, which represent different aspects of life or the universe. So, for example, you have Eshu, which is the orisha of the crossroads of you know making a decision and which path it takes you on. And he's quite a mischievous type of Orisha. So he's probably, for people who've watched Marvel and seen Loki, something close to that kind of character who's a bit mischievous and a bit, cunning. But he's the gatekeeper of the pathways that you choose and balance, essentially. So for every good decision that happens, bad outcome, or these kind of things, yin yang, that kind of principle. And through and there's many more orishas as well. There's Yemoja, who's the orisha of the river, I believe, of water, the river, those kind of aspects of reality. Um, anyway, through doing more research about um, my heritage and just building more of an understanding of self, and then going to Nigeria with the purpose of not only reconnecting with my culture for my personal self, but also getting some inspiration for the book as well. I found that this very interesting feedback loop was happening where I'll be writing a book and then I'll be researching and I'll be learning and then applying to myself and then going to places. So, for example, there's a scene in a book in this place called Olumo Rock, which is in Abeokuta in Nigeria, in southwest of Nigeria. That was put into the story um, because this rock is said to have special spiritual powers, and my dad's side of the family comes from Abeokuta, and um, the the rock was not only a spiritual hub, but they also the Egbat people who live in Abeokuta. The rock was used as a fortress and as part of their military battles when battling with other ethnic groups or other people that entered into Abeokuta. It was used as a strategic place of battle because they knew all the different nooks and crannies of how to get around this huge rock um, to find an advantage against their enemies. Anyway, after writing about it in my book, I went to actually go to the rock and learn more about. So I went there in August last year to learn more about the Egba people, specifically the kind of practices that were happening on the rock, the offerings to the gods, and all these kind of things to aid people in battle. The using the um, plants and the vegetation in the area for certain healing methods, these kind of things.
Mm.
So And now I very much feel much more rooted in my identity as a Yoruba, and it does help that I've got family, a lot of family who still live in Nigeria, and or family here that go back and forth to kind of ease myself into that. But I think while that grapple with the British Nigerian identity, and especially given the history between the two countries as well, Britain
Mm.
and Nigeria. You know, not the most rosy sunshine filled history between the two countries, at least for myself being a Nigerian. But that grapple with identity has definitely been softened through just learning. And I think that's okay actually, because you know you have to learn culture, you have to learn these things anyway. You have to, as when you get pushed out of the womb, you don't know shit. You don't know shit. You are taught everything that you know. So I think if you do feel a calling to and this is for anybody who does have these identity struggles, if they, you know, if they're split across cultures, or they're, you know, born of one you know, kind of group but in grown up in another, I think you have every right to reconnect with an identity that you feel aligns more with yourself. um and I guess going back to what you said about acceptance as well, um, if there's part of your identity which you're you know, a little bit unsure about, or a little bit um, tentative to claim, if it's part of who you are, it can't it who can remove it? Who can
Mm.
remove it but yourself? Who can remove it but yourself? Um, and I think I show in the book itself. I think I explore that struggle of reconciling with identity. Maybe in a smaller way for Tunde, because he's a teenager and he's still learning about the world. You know, he's an ignorant London teen for I guess context of understanding the world, right?
Mm.
Um, but I think for those of us who extrapolate that journey to their own lives, I think probably a big message from that is that the door is there for you to open for reconnecting with any part of your identity, should that feel right for you at any time. Um, yeah.
Mm. That's a powerful message. The door is always open. Mm. That really touched me. Yeah, the door is always open. It never closes. You know, as long as you've got a intention and desire, it's always there. You know, it's always there for us. Whatever part of our heritage and our culture we want to reconnect with. Yeah, I love that actually. I really love that. The door is always open. Demi, man, the time has flown by as always. And I imagine the listeners are, you know, wondering where they can, you know, where they can find out more about the book, where they can purchase it, where they can read it. Anything you've kind of got coming up in the near future.
Yeah, great, thank you. This is the moment I love to get to plug the book. And just to say as well, thank you for having me on, David. It's been a great conversation. Talking about the aspects, the themes within the book, I think have been. Um, I've really enjoyed talking about that with you. And for people who are interested about seeing those themes, the journey from adolescence to adulthood, reclamation of heritage, and you know, the dynamics that come with acquiring power. Ogaman, The Birth of a New King, is available in all major online book retailers. So of course you got your Amazons. You know, that power hungry Jeff Bezos is still very influential in the book world, so it has to be there. Other bookstores too, like Kobo with Rakuten, Google Books, Smashwords, Barnes and Noble, etc. Um, and if you want to read the first three chapters, of the book, you can go to my website, www.damiedun.com. So just my name.com, or you can go to my Instagram profile at Dami Edun. Go to the links there to read the first 2 chapters. And if you like it, then you can get yourself a copy and find out what happens in the rest of the story. And there should be more, let's say more art coming out to reflect some of the instances and themes in the book very soon. So that will be on my social media profiles for anyone who's interested in that.
Thank you, Dami, man. Thank you, man. Yeah, listeners, this is one of those episodes. It's just, talking some of those topics we talk about, power and reconciling identity and cultures, things that are, very close to my heart and my own personal experience. And if you've enjoyed the episode, I guess I'd just ask, you wherever you're listening to this, if you're listening to it on YouTube or Spotify or Apple Podcasts, wherever you listen to your podcast, just giving a little review if you can, or a little like or anything like that really helps the podcast reach wider out into more people and more men and people who need the support of the wonderful guests that I have on. And yeah, if you could do that, much appreciated. And yeah, I want to say a big thank you to Dami for coming on today, and thank you for listening, and I'll catch you next week. Ciao, ciao.